I've never done an actual Q&A video. I've only done Q&A live streams, which I'll link down in the description box below for you guys to check out. But I asked you what questions you guys had for me on the YouTube community feature, so make sure you're subscribed so you know when I post those, so then you can be included in the next Q&A video. But without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, first question. Do you ever plan on getting a Jackson chameleon? The answer is no, at least not anytime soon. I don't plan on getting any other reptiles anytime soon. But if I were to get another chameleon, it'd probably be a more rare species or less commonly kept species, like a carpet chameleon or Miller's chameleon, but probably not a Jackson's. Question. So I purchased some pothos plants that you recommended. However, my juvenile veiled chameleon keeps eating the dirt and the leaves. Is that normal? The answer is yes, that is normal, and this is exactly why I recommend only using live plants. Imagine if you had used a fake plant instead of that live pothos, and your chameleon tries to eat that like hard plastic, and then its body isn't able to digest it, it gets impacted, and I've actually seen chameleons pass away from eating fake plants. As far as eating dirt, that's less common, but not totally unheard of. Some people think that eating dirt is the result of improper supplements. Two-part question. It's really hard to find roaches locally in my area. How do you raise a colony of roaches at home? And last part, what's the best way to make crickets as healthy as possible? I don't breed any of my bugs, so I don't have advice on how to raise a colony of roaches. There's tons of resources online. I purchase my bugs. I will leave some resources down below. I actually have a link to 10% off your first order at doobieroaches.com. That's currently where I've been getting my doobie roaches. So if you can't find them locally, like definitely check out places online. There are tons of them. The best way to make crickets as healthy as possible is to make sure you're using excellent gut load. So that's going to be things like mustard green, collard green, sweet potato, mango, all that fresh fruits and vegetables, bee pollen. That's going to make your cricket healthy. It's when you use like the flukers, orange cubes, or things like that that aren't great, or you're not gut loading your crickets at all, then they're just basically little empty shells. So you want to be gut loading them, make the bugs nice and healthy so then you can feed them to your chameleon. What is your misting schedule? So I'm planning on doing a video on about misting schedules because what works for me and my species of chameleon in the environment that I live may not work for you. It's really dependent. Like, do you live somewhere that's humid? Then you're probably misting less often than someone who lives super dry. I also keep Parsons chameleons, which have the reputation of drinking lots and lots of water and requiring longer misting sessions. That being said, what I would recommend for you guys if you're keeping like a veiled panther or Jackson chameleon is once in the morning before lights turn on for 2 to 4 minutes, and then once in the evening before lights turn off for 2 to 4 minutes. I have like a 10-minute misting session for my Parsons because like I said, they are water goblins. If I don't do that, then I will use a dripper and help provide hydration that way. Okay, next question from Sarah H. Let's see. When they reach a certain age, I think I'll have to get a higher wattage of light bulb because they need hotter basking temps, but what age do I do that? Because mine is just 7 months right now, so I want to start knowing when I need to make these adjustments for him. So odds are you probably won't need to make adjustments. There's been some changes in the chameleon husbandry for basking temperatures, and right now the recommendation for male panther veiled Jackson chameleon is like 85 degrees Fahrenheit max, a few inches above their basking range, and then for females, nothing hotter than 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and those are totally fine temperatures to be keeping a baby and juvenile chameleon as well as an adult chameleon, so you shouldn't need to get a higher wattage bulb. They should be fine as long as your temperatures are in those mid 80s Fahrenheit. Are the Arcadia supplements any good? I've heard great things about them. I'm still doing research personally to decide if I want to switch to the Arcadia supplement line, but I've heard great things. I don't have any personal experience with them. How can I make homemade jungle vines that aren't rock hard? I've never made any jungle vines from scratch. I just use like natural branches from outside. I try to keep my enclosures as simple and naturalistic as possible, so that's going to be using live plants and using outdoor branches. I have videos about that, so I'll link those in the description for you to check out, but sorry, I don't have any advice on jungle vines. What's the best way to raise a baby chameleon? How have correct husbandry from the very beginning. The biggest mistake I see is people don't have their enclosure set up correctly, so there's a lot of mistakes and a lot of learnings that happen along the way, which like is part of the process, and I get that, and some of them are inevitable. But if you can do ample amount of research before, get your enclosure reviewed by someone trustworthy to make sure it's correct with the correct lighting, temperatures, lots of hiding places, your supplement schedule is on point, you're having lots of variety of bugs, then you're going to have a healthy chameleon from day one versus having a baby chameleon that's going through all the learning curves with you, maybe the wrong lights, maybe the wrong supplements, and that's going to impact them long term. How much so, to be determined, but if we can have correct care from the beginning, then that's going to be better. This person says, hello, I have a question. I always get worried when Rango doesn't eat much. He is just over a year old, and I know they slow their eating. Sorry, there's typos in these. I know they slow their eating from when they were growing, but I sometimes put 5 or 6 medium-sized locusts as he went off crickets, and he would gobble them up. Then the next week he'd maybe have one a day. Oh, he is a Yemen. So as long as your chameleon is eating, I think that's appropriate. The big thing with chameleons is movement. So even if they're only eating 3 or 4 bugs at a time, or that's how much they're supposed to be eating, if you only put 3 or 4 in there, they're not really moving around. So sometimes it's a good idea to put in more in the hopes that they'll only eat a couple. Also keep in mind that you can either feed your chameleon a lot on one day or spread it out over multiple days. The general recommendation for an adult, which is a 1-year-old, that would be an adult, veiled chameleon would be 3 to 4 bugs every 2 to 3 days. So if you average that out, that's about what your chameleon's eating. He's just eating them all on one day instead of over the course of a few days. So you could try to spread out your feeding schedule, and that might help. But as long as they're eating, I wouldn't be too worried about it. My veiled chameleon has a crooked horn at the peak of his head. He has had it for as long as he has been in my care. Should I be at all concerned? I'm going to say no. It's going to be mostly cosmetic. Just make sure it's not getting worse. Crooked horns or crooked bones or anything like that can be the result of metabolic bone disease, which is from improper supplements and UVB. But since you mentioned this is the way he's always been, then probably from the results of how he was taken care of before, or it's just a genetic anomaly. His is a little different. That could be too. Those are my 2 guesses as to why. Can I use a money tree plant for my chameleon? Yes. In theory you can. I've heard they don't do well though with chameleon enclosures with the water and everything, so be careful with that one. But they're safe to use. Best way to stay on top of things. I have a paper calendar and a pen, old school, and I just keep track of who ate what supplements I'm using, who pooped when did someone get handled, any weird things that I'm noticing. I track that all on a paper calendar for all 3 of my chameleons. Where's the best place to put the hygrometer, and which do you recommend? I have a digital hygrometer that I picked up from Target. It was only a couple bucks. There's a few to check out. I would recommend any digital hygrometer though. Any that has a dial, those aren't as accurate as the digital ones. However, it's hard to find a waterproof digital hygrometer. So what I do is I take mine and I put it usually in the middle of the enclosure. Sometimes I'll put it up and down just to see what range of humidity, and I'll leave it in there for a few minutes, enough for it to stabilize whatever humidity level it's registering as, and then I can check that, and then I'll take it out and then check it later on after it's been misted or before, whatever I'm doing, just to make sure my levels are where they need to be. I know some people have waterproof ones, but I've heard those are pretty pricey, so that's what I use and that's how I do it. Next question. Can you discuss signs of bowel impaction? If you already have a video on this, my bad. I understand if you have not experienced this, just want to pick your brain. So I have not experienced this, but I've heard of other keepers who have, so I'll share what I know. And so signs of impaction could be that your chameleon's not eating. I think more importantly that they're not pooping. A decline in health. Some common signs of an unhealthy chameleon would be those 2 things, and if they're hanging out at the bottom, sunken in eyes, slow lethargic movements, closed eyes, all that. And if you're seeing any of those signs, then I would suggest taking your chameleon to a vet. Do you have suggestions for gaping? So I am planning on making a video about this because this is a pretty common question. A couple of reasons. There's probably 3 most common reasons why a chameleon is gaping. 1, it's a defensive behavior. They're scared, so they're making themselves as big as possible. Excuse me. The second one would be that they are thermoregulating, so chameleons are adjusting their temperatures. So you can see that if they're doing that by their basking branch, if this is the case, then you want to make sure that their basking temperatures aren't too hot. And then the third reason could be an upper respiratory infection, but this is also usually followed by like a hissing or clicking sound. I'll try to link some resources for you guys on the different symptoms of an upper respiratory infection. Okie dokie. Next question. I recently rescued a veiled and she had improper light and improper diet and doesn't use her back legs, and I see small lumps on her back. I think she might be egg-bound or have MBD. What do you do to care for a neglected chameleon? No one ever covers this topic. They just describe how they got it, not how they help them get back to health. So the reason why there's not a lot of care information on neglected chameleons is because usually they don't make it. By the time a chameleon is showing signs of sickness or is that neglected, they usually don't last very long and end up passing away. Chameleons usually do a pretty good sign of hiding sickness, so by the time they are showing signs of sickness, it's usually too late. Not always, but that's probably why you're not finding a lot of information about it. If you do have a neglected chameleon, if they're not able to use their hind legs or MBD or anything like that, then the best recommendation is to get them into a hospital bin, which is like a Rubbermaid bin with like a towel, not a lot of things to climb on. That way if they do fall, then it's not a hard fall. Immediately getting them on the correct lighting, immediately getting them on the correct supplement schedule, and immediately taking them to an experienced reptile chameleon vet, because odds are they will need veterinary care to pull through, which is why me as just like a keeper, I also can't really give you tons of advice on how to rehab, because usually you need to work side by side with an experienced vet to provide the correct care for your chameleon. You can also go to a vet and get an x-ray to confirm whether or not she's egg-bound, and then potentially need surgery. And like I said, it's a whole thing, but like only a vet can really help you with that stuff. Okay, this person wrote me a novel, but what it comes down to is they're asking if exterior lights outside of the enclosure are going to affect the chameleon and if sound is going to affect the chameleon. So I turn all overhead lights off at night. Obviously their enclosure lights go off, but also like any ceiling lights will turn off. I've noticed that if I turn on an overhead ceiling light, that will wake up my chameleons. However, I'm in my living room and my TV is just over there. I will watch TV, sound, light, all of it, and my chameleons are unfazed. Sometimes I turn on the under counter lights of my kitchen, very small lights, and that's usually okay, but again, the ceiling light will usually wake them up or prevent them from going to sleep. Additionally, as far as sound goes, chameleons don't have external ears. It's thought that they feel the vibrations more so than hear the actual sound itself. I just recently had the fire alarm go off in my apartment, and my guys seemed unfazed by that, unbothered by the blaring fire alarm sound, so I wouldn't worry too much about sound, just more mindful of the vibrations. I know this is very hard, but how do you guess the age of a female veiled chameleon specifically? And one more I have is how to get my female to start digging. I'm not sure if she's there yet, but we've had her for some months now, and I don't want her to pass to not laying eggs. Okay, so as far as knowing the age, the only one who can know for sure is the breeder or the person who like saw her hatch out of the egg. But what you can do is compare her to other chameleons that people do know the age of. So looking up the different ages of a female male chameleon. Once your chameleon hits adulthood, about 1 year old, then it's hard to tell. A 1 year old is going to look the same as a 2 year old, as a 3 year old, as a 4 year old. So that's going to be hard to tell once they reach adulthood, but that like anytime before that you can usually gauge how old they are, at least an estimate. As far as getting her to lay eggs, the best thing you can do is make sure that your laying bin is big enough, it's the correct texture, she has a way to climb in and out, and that you just give her space and time. She'll do it on her own. Just look out for the signs of an egg-bound chameleon, but otherwise it just takes time, and it varies chameleon to chameleon of how long it takes for them to lay eggs. Do chameleons like being held? Short answer, no. Even a chameleon that comes out or is quote-unquote friendly, it's not recommended that you handle them often. They're not snuggly pets. They're not pets that should be handled frequently. It is important, I think, to be able to at least get your chameleon onto a stick so that you can transport them to a vet if nothing else, but do not ever try to snuggle them or hug them or have them out for prolonged periods of time. There's a benefit to them staying inside their enclosure because they have the UVB and humidity and heat levels that they require. Even if your chameleon likes to come out, you gotta limit it. It's like no more than an hour or two tops. If your chameleon hangs outside its enclosure all day, then it's not getting the UVB exposure that it needs inside its enclosure. My chameleon totally ignores the insects I put inside of a feeding bowl. It's not at the bottom of the cage. So I have a whole video on tips and tricks for cup feeding, but make sure the bugs are moving, make sure you're giving your chameleon privacy, make sure that they can easily find the bowl, and lastly, some chameleons just don't cup feed. Apollo will and Neptune will, but Luna is like, she lives a pampered life, and so she prefers to tongue feed or hand feed over cup feeding. I think it's because she likes the bugs wiggling. Like, even if they're moving in the cup though, she still prefers me not to. You know, there's lots of ways to feed your chameleon, and yes, cup feeding is very convenient, but if that's not working, then you may want to look at other options. Well, I think I got to everyone's question. Some people ask questions that I already have videos on, such as like what multivitamin I use, best plants to use, how to build trust with a chameleon, what substrate to use. I have close to 80 videos, I think, now on my YouTube channel, so take advantage of the search feature and see if there's a video already about your topic. If not, you're always welcome to leave your questions or comments down below. Feel free to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and you can subscribe so you know when I post a new video. You can follow Neptune and all my chameleons on Instagram at Neptune the Chameleon. I'm also on TikTok, so if you guys want to check that out, feel free. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys! On the YouTube community feature, there are sirens. You can probably hear that. Man.